Hi everybody, welcome to another one of our video educational tutorials. Today I'm going to be addressing how you make a diamond 4-patch wedge. And this makes beautiful blocks, but they are definitely a bit of a challenge. And because they're more challenging, we recommend that you be familiar with the Wedge Star tool and the basic instructions before you jump into this process. But let me tell you what, as soon as you feel comfortable, you're going to love being able to make these as well. Now, the first step in the process will be to determine the size block that you want to make. There are lots of different block sizes on the technique sheet. One of the things that I do is highlight the size that I'm going to make. And I do that right on the technique sheet with either an Expo marker or a Sharpie marker. It helps to keep me on track. And for our video, we're going to be working with a 12-inch block. The chart will tell you all the information that you need. It will tell you the size strips that you need to cut to be able to create the small wedges that create the Wedge Star unit. It will give you the size squares that you need to cut that will create the corners. It will tell you the size strips that you need to cut to create the pieced diamonds. Now, there are 4 diamonds in each of the larger diamonds, and that means you're going to need to cut 4 individual strips. 1 strip for the outer diamond, 1 strip for the inner diamond, and 2 strips that will become the middle diamonds. Now, the first step in the process, once your strips are cut, is to create strip sets. You're going to need 2 sets, set A, set B. Set A has the middle diamond color and the inner diamond color. Strip set B has the middle and the outer. To save space and get maximum cuts out of your strip, we recommend that you stagger those a little bit when you're sewing, rather than having them equal at the top. And we also recommend that once they're stitched, you press those seams open to give you very, very flat seams in your diamonds. So once you have that strip set A and that strip set B stitched and pressed, the next thing we're going to do is layer them together. And it doesn't really matter which one is on top of the other, but usually when I cut, and in the instructions, we have you cutting with the strips being placed wrong side up. And that's going to make an easy cutting for right-handers. Left-handers, you can just check out our information on how to cut left-handed on our website. But after we've got them layered, I want to make sure that the edges are closely aligned. And then I'm going to set up my 45-degree angle cut. This happens to be a 45-degree angle tool. So if I take the tool and position either the edge of the tool or the stitching line that's just inside, 1/4 of an inch on the inside, right on my seam, take a secondary ruler and place it up against there. Just like that, I now have that 45-degree angle that I can trim away. And once I do that, I'm going to proceed to subcut these strips at the same width that the strips were cut at the beginning. Again, back to my chart, 1 3/4 was the cut size of these strips. So I'm going to be measuring 1 3/4 inches from the cut edge that I just made to make that cut. So 2 things that I actually align. I line up the 1 3/4 along that cut edge, but I also like to, on this is my favorite cut apart tool, I use the 45-degree line that's right there so that I've got 2 things, the 1 3/4 and this, to maintain that 45-degree angle and make those subcuts. I'm going to need 8 pairs in order to be able to create 1 block. So once you have your units subcut out of your strip sets, the next thing to do is piece your diamonds. I flip my pieces right side up, and what I make sure that I do is I arrange them so that I get the correct look that I'm looking for in my finished project. And after I've got them arranged, and I would stack these up, I would put 8 of set A's and 8 of set B's in a stack, the next step is to create or mark the match points that are going to help me align the seams so that I get a nice match at those diamond intersections. Remember, the area that I'm going to mark, use my magic wand, line up the guideline, and use my friction pen to make that mark. On the next piece, rather than flipping it over and marking on the wrong side, I just note where I'm going to mark, use my magic wand again, and make this mark on the right side. So one is on the wrong side and one is on the right side, so that when I go to position these and pin them, I can flip them over, use a fine pin, don't use one of those big chunky pins, pin right through the intersection of the mark that you made and the seam, and then without having to peek at the wrong side, I can just go right through there. Now I feel safe marking on the right side with a friction pen because I know that heat will remove that. Please don't do that with a permanent marker. But by matching with a pin right through the match points, I can then stitch these units and be assured that the seams are going to match perfectly. Now once you have those stitched together, you're going to want to go ahead and press that seam open as well, so you have a nice flat intersection there. But I'm going to highly recommend that you take care and that you practice this step, because it's very important to have those match rather than being mismatched. It will make a difference in your project going forward. So once you have your 8 sections carefully pieced, carefully matched, we're going to proceed with the next step, which is going to be to trim the outer point of the diamond. Now, in order to be able to do that, the first thing you're going to want to do is consult the chart for which guidelines you're going to be focusing on the tool. And for my 12-inch block, my outer point trim lines are going to be marked at the 6-inch. Now, what am I talking about? I'm actually going to be taking my Wedge Star tool, working on the wrong side that's covered with Invisigrip, and I'm going to make 2 marks. And I make those marks with, I like to use this fine line permanent Sharpie pen, but I'm going to be extending the lines that are the 6-inch lines. So I'm going to put my straight edge of some sort onto the ruler and mark a guideline that extends the 6-inch in one direction, and replace the straight edge and make another mark going out in that direction. These crosshairs are going to kind of make an X that you'll use when you trim that outer point. Flipping your ruler over, placing this, I again am right-handed, so I'm placing it toward 2 o'clock. Lefties, you would be over here toward about 10 o'clock. But you'll use those combination of the tool guidelines at the 6 and those extended guidelines coming out from the 6 to be able to trim the outer points of those pieced diamonds. You see they're made bigger, but not a whole lot bigger. So after all of those outer points have been trimmed, come back and lay out your assembly line piecing, lay out your trimmed diamonds, 8 wedges on this side, 8 wedges on this side, and begin your Wedge Star construction method. We recommend that you add the wedge that's on the right first. You're going to line that up, and when you line that up, what you're going to do is basically make the tip of the diamond be right at the wedge and stitch with the diamond on top so that you have a good look at the piece that you just trimmed. Once you add that first wedge, you're going to press that wedge toward the diamond. Those are the same instructions that are in the basic Wedge Star. Take the left-hand wedge, position it, but make sure that you're stitching with that diamond on top so that you have a great look at that edge of the diamond. Once you're done with that stitching, you'll have your diamond wedge, and that seam is pressed toward the wedge that you just added. So both seams are pressed in the same direction. This is what makes everything nest when you go to put it together. So once your wedges are built, stitched, and pressed, it's now time to use the Wedge Star tool again to trim down the inner point. And you know, the Wedge Star tool is the only tool that you need to do this if your blocks are less than 24 inches. Again, if you've practiced with the basics, this is going to be familiar, except that instead of just using one line on the outside edge, we're going to be able to use two lines. We're going to be able to use those 6-inch and those extension lines, but you're also, since you're making a 12-inch wedge, going to be able to use the 12-inch lines on the outside of that diamond as if you were making a 12-inch block, which we are. So I've got my 6-inch and my extensions, the 12-inch lines there, get them lined up. This is set up for right-handed trimming. I would come up on one side and carefully come back on the other side. And again, this is exactly how you would do this if your block is less than 24 inches. You know, it's pretty cool that this tool will make these blocks all the way up to 48 inches, but you are going to have to tag team rulers, both your Wedge Star and a longer ruler, in order to be able to trim down your wedges. This happens to be the wedge for a 32-inch finished block. The extension lines that I drew on my tool are at 16, which is basically half of that 32-inch size. And when I go to line up the Wedge Star ruler, and you can kind of see those extension lines, I'm going to line up the guidelines for the 16 and those extension lines. I don't have anything I can line up at that outside point, but I'm going to line those guidelines up, X marking the spot, take a longer ruler, position it up against the edge of the wedge, then carefully remove the wedge and take my cutter and run it along in this direction. And that's how I would cut the one side. When I go to cut the other side, I'm going to need to reverse the wedge, do the same thing, take my Wedge Star tool, look at the 16 and those extension lines that I drew on the ruler, add my extension ruler to this side, remove, and run my cutter this way. That's how you're going to be able to cut those bigger wedges to be able to make those bigger stars. The final steps are just like the steps that you do in the basic instructions. You'll take those trimmed wedges, you'll take them and piece them together into pairs, take the pairs and piece them together into halves, put your halves together to create your octagon block. Once that's done, you'll then finish the blocks with the same processes. Use the flat edge trim line that's on your Wedge Star tool to trim off. Flat edge trim line goes here. The center line goes right down through the middle. Trim away for the corners here, 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 and here. Add those oversized triangles to each of those corners, and then come back and trim down those blocks so that your block, when you are done, is exactly the right size. All of the seams are exactly where they need to be to give you points and a beautiful block that you're going to be proud to put into your next quilt. So be practiced with the basic Wedge Star, but get ready for adding some real excitement to a project when you use our 4-patch diamond wedge technique sheet and create blocks that are going to knock everybody's socks off.